Well, every fortnight on Sarah's Country, we've been focusing, if you follow along, on the E Tipu Speakers, which is an event coming in May to Christchurch on the future of our food and fibre here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and all of the challenges we face, but with some thought-provoking leaders in various elements of our food systems. And of course, one of the very important parts of our food systems, especially what we highlighted on yesterday's show around food waste and the distribution of our food, particularly to our most vulnerable, is one of our big challenges here in New Zealand. And the primary sector, I know, and if I can speak on behalf of, genuinely care about the food security of our own. So does our next guest, Lisa Booth, the founder and CEO of Kete Kai, Aotearoa's most accessible food box, born out of her frustration with the current food system. Kete Kai's goal is to work together to end hunger in Aotearoa by 2030, using technology to provide accessible food for all. Lisa's passion for people, community and learning are what drives her, and she joins us now. Lisa, kia ora, and thank you so much for coming on the program. Your long-term vision is out of this world, but of course, we're all right behind you. End hunger by 2030.
Oh, kia ora. Thank you for having us. Yeah, absolutely. We do have a big goal, but there's no point in going out there, softly. It's a pretty big problem in New Zealand, and we're here to help tackle it in any way we can.
And you've also you're an activator with SheEO, a ridiculously generous, amazingly radical global initiative founded by Vicky Saunders that helps women-led ventures. You've been helped and supported and celebrated to create Kete Kai with their support.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just recently joined SheEO in the last sort of couple of months, but I think what's really cool is their radical generosity, like you said. I mean, that's part of what we do in our kaupapa is about giving back. And so I guess when you're in this space, it's not an easy space, like giving back or trying to put stuff into the community. So surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded is really important.
It states that you're a meal kit with a mission. This is more than just a box of the basics arriving for breakfast, lunch and dinner at a more affordable price than some of our other food boxes, is it?
Yeah, I guess we kind of say that we're a tech company disguised like a food company. And the reason for that is that our big ambition, we know that we can't do that just by providing food. We need to work with the key players in the community. So what we're doing is we're doing some pilot programs with some really cool communities like Papakura Marae or Cambridge Community House to figure out how can we bring our learnings from what we've done in creating a meal kit to enable them to create their own food solutions using technology. So that's why we say we're on a mission to help.
Okay, so can you explain more about how it's a technology-based company?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have some really crazy smart developers that are sort of looking at how do we do heavy lifting, because when we look at the food industry and the players in it, whether they're in the farming industry or retail, generally the technology is quite a bit further behind than other industries. So I come from digital marketing where we've got the craziest, coolest tools to do the most simple functions, but as soon as you go into any other sort of food-based industry, it tends to be quite far behind. So we're kind of like, well, what would it look like if we were able to create a meal kit company that was successful in its own right and take the learnings and build technology to make meal kits really easy and accessible to create for any type of business or community and put that technology into communities? Does that make sense?
So, okay, can you give me an example of how we would be able to do that within the local community I am in here in Lincoln?
Yeah, absolutely. So if there was like a local community within Lincoln that were keen, what you'll probably find actually, if I take a step back, is that most communities are actually doing a food box of some sort. But what they, and usually like sort of disguised like a food parcel, right? But when we actually dig a little bit deeper into these food parcels, we find that usually they're lacking some simple things like recipes that enable people that are actually using these sort of food parcels to be able to cook them and get the best efficiency out of the box. So what we're doing is we can work with that community and say, hey, what would it look like if we paired recipes with those food parcels that you're sending out? But also, what would it look like if we opened up supply channels that we've got, or actually those relationships that we've got with particular suppliers so that you can get your food for cheaper, so your dollar can go a little bit further as well.
Fantastic. So therefore, it's about communities, lifting each other up and supporting each other. How is it funded for the food parcels?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of it is funded through myself and my investors. But then we also work with some communities we've managed to get a little bit of funding to do some piloting programs. But our goal is actually so that our food side, which is our meal kits that are going out, that actually funds the technology. So we're talking about being a social enterprise that is self-funded.
Okay, so I am just looking down here. I can go on, and particularly all the add-ons. It's like the beauty of having online shopping from the supermarket at the same time as buying a bundled selection of food that I can prepare myself as well. So $85, I would purchase this 5 classic dinners, and that's for 2 adults, and I know that I'm contributing to food parcels at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, what we've found with the meal kits that we're putting together and the research that we did was that people were interested in getting a meal kit that was a lot simpler than what was currently on the market. So they wanted to do lasagna and tacos and, beef stroganoff and those sorts of things. They didn't want it to be complicated. The other thing is that they wanted less packaging. So what we do is, I say this to some of my friends, we give you a whole packet of rice and we expect that if there's 3 meals with rice in it, that you are capable of splitting that up. So we're not going to send you 3 different sort of parcels of rice and bits and pieces like that. So we reduce the packaging, simple basic meals. It's kind of like grocery shopping, but with a little bit more simplicity there with having it delivered to your door.
Fantastic. I've actually got into ordering big glass jars and labelling everything with a label maker and having the big 3 litre of rice and flour and everything like that. So I totally relate heavily to this. And sometimes you just do want a simple meal as well. So what are some of those fundamental things you've found in researching and unpacking our food system here in New Zealand that really frustrate you, that the low-hanging fruit for us to change?
Yeah, the most frustrating thing is I think there is a massive gap between the people that have the money and the technology and the resource and the people that don't. So that's kind of where we sit. So when we look at, for example, a community centre that might be servicing, say, 200 to 300 families, and they are trying to figure out how to pull together a food parcel. They've got funding, potentially from the government, so they might have a big sort of lot of money. And then they've got to then figure out how to create a food parcel. And so that slows down their whole process for them. So that's one of the biggest frustrations. Also, even probably on top of that is the fact when you look at the statistics of how much food we produce in New Zealand, yet food insecurity, I think the latest stats was that it's impacting around about 1.2 million people in New Zealand. When we produce enough food to feed our country, 3 or 4 times over. So that blows my mind. How is that even possible?
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible, and it's something that I've been just as passionate watching from the sidelines about how ridiculous it is that we export 95% of our produce, yet we can't fundamentally fix the framework within our own domestic food security to lift up our most vulnerable, and also to stop thinking that it's the government's role to play in this as well.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. And I think the government, from some of the, I don't know how to say this, but I guess some of the people I've talked to that are within the framework of the government, it's not the people in there that are the problem. Sometimes it's the framework that they're stuck in because they genuinely want to help. And there's sort of a lot of governance and stuff that is sort of stopping some of this progression. But then there's some really epic sort of organisations like Kete Kai, which is sort of advocating for zero hunger in New Zealand. They do some incredible work. And also a lot of the iwis and marais that we've talked to and are working with, they are trying to shift the needle as well. And I think what's really interesting is I think we're seeing a lot less people put blame in place and starting to look a lot more sort of focused on solutions. And also, I think when we're looking at solutions, not being scared of failing, because if we have this fear of failure, then we don't push the boundaries as well. So I'm seeing a lot of these changes happen in a lot of the conversations that I'm having with people, which is exciting. But I think we need more of it and faster and harder. Yeah.
Fantastic, Lisa. You're such a woman on a mission. I love it. And you can catch Lisa at the Aotearoa event where she'll be speaking for much longer than she just spoke to us about the work that she's doing with Kete Kai. Check it out online. It's absolutely incredible.